So I did have to learn quite a bit starting last April, last May. I attended a few webinars like this one, for example, but pretty much I knew that I wanted the students to be acquiring their own data in some way. And I felt that way back in April and May of last year, and I still feel that way. I think it's really important that they have that ability. So yeah, I did review a few different simulations, and I was interested in seeing what kind of content they could provide, because I really didn't want to be reinventing the wheel. And I was thinking about going back in September and how much work it was going to be. So one thing that I did was I watched a webinar, and that was a virtual CIC webinar. So if you are a member of the CIC, you would have access to that, but I have the instructor's name up on the screen, and she was talking about her experience with Beyond Labz, and she was giving a few tips and tricks. So I thought that was very, very valuable. And then an instructor who actually taught me at CBU, which is in Nova Scotia, she had some really good feedback. She had gone through it with a smaller class in her spring intersession. So normally what I would do is I would have a lab manual. So the students get their lab manual every term, and then they're filling out their data, observations, calculations for each particular experiment, and then handing that to me at the end of the particular lab. And then once per term, they would do a formal written lab report. So there I was thinking, okay, I need to be preparing all of these report sheets from scratch for the Beyond Labz experiments, but they were already provided in the student manual. And then the other thing that I would have during my lab time would be a grading scheme, or just a grading key for me and for the TAs, and Beyond Labz was providing that in their instructor manual, so I could make that connection right away. So like I mentioned, the webinar, the trial versions that I was able to play around with for I think weeks and weeks at a time, and then all the communications from especially Kelsey and Heather and Brian, and then the price was really competitive too. So those were a lot of the reasons why we decided to go with Beyond Labz at Acadia. And I should mention too, we also bought licenses for the organic labs. That instructor was really impressed with Beyond Labz as well. So the labs ran over a 10-week period in the fall term. So I'll just focus on the fall term. And so I have experiments here, 1 through 5, and these were all the presets that were given from Beyond Labz. And so each experiment, I'm calling them an A and a B part, but really they are experiments on their own. And the A experiment is just highlighted. I called that more of the featured experiment, and that's what the students would have a quiz on. So each experiment, the A and B part, they would last for 2 weeks. The students were given all of the content a few days before that 2-week period would start. And then on the last Friday of that 2-week period, they would pass in their report sheet and they'd pass in their notebook. Over that 2-week period, on day 1, you would give, I would give my quiz, and then they would have the 2 weeks to work on those particular experiments. So I think originally going into my setup for the fall, I was thinking about in the 2-week period, give the students 3 experiments, but just by default, what happened was during week 1, they would only work on experiment 1A. And during week 2, they would only work on experiment 1B, and it was just their way of sort of checking things off. And the TAs also appreciated it too, because they knew exactly what questions were coming. So what I did was in the summertime, I had access to the student manual. So within the student manual, the procedure is provided, as well as those post-lab questions. So I was taking that document and just editing that as I needed to, and providing that to the students. And I would just refer to it as the procedure. So I'd refer to it as the procedure. I'd post that up on our LMS site. And then once they filled in their answers and gave it back to me, we would just call that a report sheet. So the procedure was empty, report sheet was filled in with all their information. And then as far as the TAs and myself, we're looking for that answer key from day to day. So the instructor manual had all that information already. So we use Teams at Acadia. So I was preparing that document and just posting that up on Teams. As far as LMS, this is a a look at what's happening on mine. So like I mentioned before, last September, it would have been pretty empty, but I just made sure at the very top of LMS, everything that the students need for Beyond Labz was there. So all of the instructions are there, their activation code was there, there's a video there as well on how to set things up. And then I had the support website there, and just, you know, okay, go ahead, go to the site, click more help if you have any questions. And that pretty much reminds me that within the first few weeks, I started noticing, okay, they have some questions about getting things going, but those questions are pretty much all the same. So on my discussion board, directly onto Acorn with the TAs, I just sort of set up just a quick little blurb that we'd be ready to send to the students if they had an issue. So, so it was sort of like, try this. If that doesn't work, try this. And if that doesn't work, go ahead and contact the support team. And I think somewhere around September or October, Heather gave me a sort of estimate about how long it's taking to get back to the students. So I just made sure to include that as well, so they wouldn't be deterred and, you know, thinking, okay, I won't bother ask for any help. So it was, you know, things like 30 minutes to a couple of hours, right? So that was really encouraging for them to know that. And as far as the week to week with the experiments, this is what my LMS looked like. So I'm just mentioning, okay, I have an experiment 2, A and B. There's the titles of those experiments. I'm providing them below. They're just referred to as experiment 2A and B procedures. I tell them for experiment number 2, you have to take a quiz and the date. For that quiz, you want to review your PowerPoint slides and your procedures. And then below, just talking about when everything would be due. And you can see at the very bottom, I'm just giving the link to the quiz, your procedures, here's your slides. And then I have 2 Turnitin assignments. That's what we refer to them as at Acadia. And you can see where the students are submitting their report sheets and where they're submitting their notebook. So again, everything would be scanned for plagiarism through those links. But the TAs are also able to do their grading through the Turnitin Feedback Studio. And I didn't mention the notebook already, but what I was asking them to do was to take their data, to take their observations from the Beyond Labz lab and make up a Microsoft Word document. So it was looking a lot like their lab books would in the Gen Chem lab. Table of contents, all the pages are numbered, but then for every experiment they're having their data, their observations, and their calculations. And then I don't have any sort of direct links to my videos, but what I did before getting started was I made my first YouTube channel. And on that, when it was safe to do so, I went back into the lab and I made some videos about safety, just a general tour of the lab. I went through and did either the same reaction that was coming up in Beyond Labz or a similar reaction. And I was trying to showcase some techniques. So in most of the videos, it is me. In some, we have some TAs, but I thought that connection between seeing me on video and teaching the course was important. And then also it was a really great stepping off point for some really good conversations with the students. So those videos were letting them make the connection between what's happening with Beyond Labz and what happens in person. So I think that's all that I wanted to share, and can just mention to everyone that's here, the great team, that it was a great experience at Acadia, and we really enjoyed it. And I guess the best way to show that is to sign up again. And I just mentioned to Kelsey that we're interested in using it for the spring session as well.